So welcome back. Now we are going to take a look at the Satipatthana Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness. This first translation comes from Bhikkhu Bodhi. And I have, you notice there's a little footnote. It's actually an end note there. So I've listed all of the sources of these texts. They're back at the very end of the document here. So if you want to look up the exact book that these reference, then you can look those up. But these are kind of my summaries of how they explain these things. So here there are two versions of this sutra in the Pali Canon. There's a long one and a middle length one. And the primary difference has to do with that the long one does a more in-depth analysis of the Four Noble Truths. Okay? The Four Noble Truths are included in the one we're going to look at. It's just not included to the same degree, the same depth of analysis that we're going to look at here. So that middle length one is sufficient for our purposes. Now, the purpose of this particular sutra is the establishment of mindfulness. And so sometimes it's called the Four Establishments of Mindfulness. You see it written that way. So we used the word before, or the phrase, focused attention. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about mindfulness. We're being mindful of something. We're really focusing our attention on something without drifting off. When we drift off, we're no longer being mindful. So that's a little easier said than done. It's easy to drift off. If you've done meditation, you have that experience. So some authors will use the term awareness for that, and so sometimes mindfulness and awareness are used as synonyms for each other, because they actually are in the English language. But in using the terms in terms of what we talk about in Buddhism, that makes it a little bit complicated. Most authors use mindfulness for what we're talking about here, and they use awareness to refer to whether we're paying attention to whether we're being mindful. Okay? Like hand puppets. Here's mindfulness, I'm paying attention to this. Here's awareness, am I paying attention at all? Okay? So that's one way to think about that. So there's kind of two pieces to the pie, if you will, in terms of learning to do the practice, although this one doesn't really talk much about that. But it does make the point that we need to be careful when we're reading about these things. When they use those terms, which way are they using this? Are they using mindfulness to talk about what we're talking about with mindfulness, or are they talking about awareness? Or are they using the word awareness to talk about what we're talking about and using mindfulness to talk about what we talk about with awareness? See? So terminology can get complicated, and those aren't the only ones where those things get mixed up in various written forms, but that is an important thing to be aware of. And then there are also here four main categories as a part of this. So there's first is the body. So these are the four. When it talks about the four foundations, so the first one is the body, being mindful of the body. The second one is feeling. Feeling pretty much in the thinking about touch kind of feeling as opposed to emotional kind of feeling. And the third one is mind. And the fourth one, other phenomena. So we're pretty much including everything in one way or another. So altogether there are 21 different subjects of focus as a part of this. So it's probably not the thing that you're going to do all of at the same time in a 20-minute meditation. Okay? It takes a while to work your way through all of this. So it's a good one to do in retreat. The initial steps are to develop a sense of serenity, calm abiding. We talk about shamatha as calm abiding. So there's this sense of serenity as a part of that. And then out of that we begin to develop a sense of insight. So shamatha and vipassana. And so they develop sequentially. So you can do these without doing every part listed. In fact, there are some places where it actually gives some abbreviated alternatives to this in the actual original source, and so we'll see those in our list here. I've included those. So doing everything can take quite a long time, as I said, and we may need to condense things. But there are some condensed options available in this, as well as later on we're going to look at some shorter versions of these that you could do as well. But I still recommend that in the beginning you do the fairly detailed form, just so you become real familiar with that. And then if you don't have time to do that real detailed form on a regular basis, do one of the abbreviated ones. Okay? And you still get some of the benefit from that. So the first part is the contemplation of the body. So here it's divided into several different parts. It has to do with subduing longing and dejection in regard to the world, so that attachment or aversion to things in the world, and moving toward increasingly subtler levels of calmness, that serenity, okay? Peace of mind, peace in our body, and so forth. So the first technique that's used here, and I might point out that some of the criticisms have been that in this particular sadhana, or it's actually not a sadhana, sutra, it is just a list. It doesn't tell you how to do the practices. And only in the mindfulness, or the mindfulness with breathing one that we'll look at later, does it actually tell you how to do these. But as we look at these, there's not that much difference actually in them. So here, first one is mindful of breathing. This is oftentimes what we talk about when we do shamatha. Just focus on the breath, the rise and fall of the breath. We talk about it in different ways. It can be the rise and fall of the abdomen. It can be the coming and going of the breath through your nostrils. Or it can even be a visual kind of thing, or an imagined kind of thing of imagining the breath going out and coming back and so forth. But here, it's only the abdomen. Okay? So the rising and falling of the abdomen in and out. So let's just do that a little bit. Just focus on your abdomen rising and falling for a few breaths. So anybody have trouble doing that? Feel it? Now there is a suggestion that if you have trouble, just put your hand on your abdomen so that you can physically, that adds a little more of a touch feel to it as you do it. So do that a couple times so you can see the difference. Okay? So you would do that a number of different times as a part of that. So then it gets subdivided a little bit further. In the next one, when mindfulness of qualities of long and short breaths. Now the short breath, the definition of short breath here is normal breathing. Okay? And so then the long breath would be something where you slow your breath down real slow and do it that way. And the idea is to see what is the difference between a short breath and a long breath. So you can do a few short breaths, then you can do a few long breaths, and just kind of get an idea of what the difference is among those. So try a couple of short breaths and then a couple of long breaths you can touch or just ordinarily sit and feel. So after you do that for a little while, you go on to the next part on page 6 here, experiencing qualities of the whole body. as you breathe in and out. Okay, so now it's not focused on just the abdomen, but everything from head to toe, and just whatever's happening as you do this breathing. So you're still breathing in and out. It doesn't specify whether it's short or long, but you're just breathing. Okay? So in a fairly natural way, you would breathe and just see what's going on in the body. So you might notice that you notice one particular thing, and a few moments later you notice another different thing, and so forth as you go through that process. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. The third part is tranquilizing or calming the bodily formation in and out. So as we view the body, we're actually forming an idea of the body in our mind. Okay? And so what we're doing is we're trying to calm that down. So this is a more intentional effort to calm that body down. Or maybe I shouldn't use the word effort. That's kind of contradictory there, isn't it? So, but a more relaxation, more relaxing of the body as a part of that. And feel the difference as you do that. As it calms more, feel that. As you're breathing in and out again. So that gives you just a little sense of that. And so it talks then about contemplation of first the body internally and externally, or both, and both. So we pay attention to the internal aspects of the body, and we pay attention more to the external aspects, the surface of the body, and then to both of those together. The second one is the nature of the body's arising or vanishing. So in our mind, the body appears, and maybe for a moment, because you're focused on something else, the whole body's no longer there. You know, you're focused on one experience. My knee hurts, so I'm focused on the pain in my knee, and not focused on my whole body. Okay, so it's vanished, went away. And then it comes back. Oh yeah, my body. And then the third one, so this is an or, so this is A, B, or C. There is a body. The idea that there is a body comes to our mind. And we're focused on that idea, the concept. But it says then with bare knowledge and mindfulness. So what that means when it says bare knowledge is we're not thinking about what that means. There is the body. Oh, let's see. What does that mean? There is a body. What does the word body mean? What does there is? What is it really talking about here? No, that's not what we're doing. We're just experiencing that there is a body. And so we don't think about it conceptually in that way. And then it says to dwell independent, not clinging to anything. And so at that point, we just relax. So this is like shamatha, where we just relax. Or it's like when we do emptiness and we're doing tantra. And so we're doing a deity practice, and we visualize, and we do the mantra, and then we just let it all go into emptiness. So it's just that. You're not thinking about it. You're not doing anything. You're just relaxing into that state. Okay? So that gives you an idea of the first one. We don't have time to do each of these, so we'll move on then to the next one, which are the 4 postures. So we don't always do this when we're just sitting and meditating. In order to be completely mindful all the time, we have to do it when we're doing other things. So this introduces the idea of doing some other things. So the first one is walking. So you can get up and you can do the same thing, but paying attention to the body when you're walking. Inside, outside, both, and so forth. Standing. Just standing. Maybe you're waiting in line somewhere. Standing. Standing doing the dishes. Whatever. Sitting. Well, we already did sitting. Assumed we were in sitting posture, since we were all in the sitting posture here doing it. Or lying down. You go to bed, or you just woke up in the morning. Spend a little time scanning your body, feeling what is going on in the body. What does it feel like? What is it? What's my breathing doing? Continue to breathe. Think about the body, inside, outside, both, and so forth. Or, so here's one of those shortcuts, however the body is. You know, it's just whatever the body is, you're focused on the body kind of generically, and just whatever happens to come up as a part of that. The next one is called clear contemplation, and focusing on purpose, achievability, without losing the object of focus, and having no abiding self. That is, we're not really focused on the idea of self. So the clear contemplation is of activities. Internally, externally, both. So what does that mean? Well, there's a list. Okay. So the first one is going forward and returning. So we pay attention to the fact, okay, I'm going forward, I am returning. Okay. What does that feel like? What is going on here as a part of that? Being mindful of all of that. Okay. When you do walking meditation, for example, we take usually very slow steps. We feel the heel go down, and then the front part of the foot, and this one comes off the ground, and then it touches and goes down, and so forth. Very calmly, very slowly. That would be one possibility for doing this particular one. But in general, though, we're looking not just at the feet, we're looking at the whole body. So you could look at different parts of it at different times and so forth. But the basic idea is that in these 4 postures, or other ones, we could look at what's going on. And so the abbreviation, or however the body is, at times when the body is active, what's going on? Okay? Pay attention, mindfulness. And so going forward, returning. The next one, looking ahead or looking away. Paying attention. What's going on in the body when I look away? What's happening when I'm looking straight ahead? You know, I look over here. How does that feel? What is going on? How does the body feel different when I do that? How does things change when I go from one to the other? And then bending and stretching. So different motions that we might go through. Stretching in the morning and get out of bed, or other times when you're exercising and maybe you do some stretching. Pay attention to that. And then here's one that may not apply. When you're wearing robes, carrying an outer robe and a bowl. This would be when you're going to do begging for food, kind of thing. And you do begging for food, wearing robes? No? Okay. And then eating, drinking, chewing, and tasting. So we're sitting down at the table or wherever we eat, sitting down, and the process of eating, picking it up, putting it in the mouth, tasting it, chewing it, so forth, and as a part of that. And then maybe drinking as part of that. Defecating and urinating, not times that we normally think about doing practice, but that too should be included. So whatever we're doing, and we pay attention to what's going on in the body as we do that, different feelings, so forth. Then the next one is some repetition here, walking, standing, sitting, but also falling asleep, waking, talking, keeping silent. So lots of other things. You're probably going to need to keep the list handy when you're doing these things, because the list includes a lot of stuff. Okay, give you ideas. Oh yeah, let me try that one, or let me remember that one. But you get to the point where you're always doing this, and that's the goal with this practice, is to always pay attention to what's going on in here, this term, with the body. Okay, no matter what the body is doing, kind of abstracting yourself from the body, those are things you want to pay attention to. And then, the last part of it here, of this particular series, dwelling independently, not clinging to anything in the world. Okay? So it's just like you relax, you rest, and you don't think about it anymore. Okay? Just be. But wait, there's more. Okay, D, contemplate the unattractive, impure nature of the body. So here we do it internally, externally, and both, which is the usual thing. And there's a fairly long list here to look at. So we have head and body hair. Okay, this hair, any other body hair that you might have. Looking at that as an unattractive, impure nature. Some of us like our hair, so maybe we think that's attractive. But, it's a pain to take care of, and I got to do this, and I got to do that, and so forth. So the things about it that maybe you don't like as much, the unattractive aspects of that. Or nails. Oh, I got to clip them, I got to trim them, I got to put nail polish on, whatever. Teeth. Brushing my teeth. So when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, evening, think about that. Skin itself. Oh, I got a little cut here the other day, doing something or other. Flesh, generally. Sinews, the little connector things. Bones, the bone marrow, the kidneys, the heart, the liver. Now, usually the internal things like this, some of them we can kind of sense, but other ones we can't really sense. I don't recall ever having sensed my spleen, for example. Maybe I would if it was hurting and sore and from an illness, infection, but normally I don't. Lungs, I've had that. Intestines, connective tissue, the stomach, feces, bile, phlegm. The feces would be when it's inside the body. Phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, and urine. Pretty complete list of different things about the body, unattractive aspects of the body. Now, I don't know that you necessarily need to do every single one of these when you're doing this part of the practice, but the idea is to look at aspects that are related to that. Now, sometimes the path of individual liberation, as I tend to call it, is referred to as the path of renunciation. Guess why? Looking at all these things as unattractive. But wait, there's more. Okay. Contemplate the elements of the body, internally, externally, or both. Here we're looking at the elements. What are the elements? Earth, water, fire, air. So it doesn't include space in this list, but earth. Earth is a physical aspect of the body, the form. Water, liquids in the body, urine or things that we would drink. Fire is the heat or the temperature of the body. Air is the breath going in and out. Okay? So those are related to the elements, and so it gives another way of focusing on the body. And then at the end of that, again, we dwell independently, not clinging to anything in the world. And then F, 9 charnel ground contemplations. Here we go even deeper into the renunciation aspect, okay? Internally, externally, in both, of corpses in different stages of decay. Now, what actually they would do, and to some extent they still do this, they would go to a charnel ground, which was a place where people didn't have enough money to pay for a cremation, and that they could dump the bodies. And the bodies would basically rot away. Different animals would come for some lunch or dinner and so forth as a part of that. And so what they would do is they would go and sit and actually look at these corpses in these various levels of decay. And so this is what this is a list of the kind of things that we might experience. I was reading not too long ago about, I think it was in Thailand, where a monastery, in order to fulfill this practice, would go to I guess we would call it a mortuary. And then they could see what was going on with a deceased body. Of course, they don't go through all these stages per se, but that you might see in charnel ground. But the basic idea. So the first one here, the nature of the corpse, 1 to 3 days dead, bloated, livid, oozing matter, and then thinking about your body going through that. Okay? So first you would actually literally see one, and then you reflect on your body after it dies, going through those stages. Then the nature of the corpse being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, worms, and then also your body going through that. Number 3, the nature of the skeleton held together with flesh and blood, and then yours. Then the nature of the skeleton held together without flesh and smeared with blood, and then again yours. The nature of the skeleton held together without flesh and blood, and then yours. The nature of a disconnected, scattered bones. Okay? Then the nature of the bones bleached white for the sun. Nature of the bones heaped up and gathered together for whatever reason. The nature of the bones more than a year old, rotted and crumbled to dust. Okay? So you go through each of these phases thinking about that. Now, because we're not likely to actually literally experience those things, you can do it just imagining. Most of us have probably seen elements of that watching a nature show of some other animal or something like that, or we may have actually seen elements when animals like that when we were walking, going for a hike somewhere, or even dead animals on the road and so forth. So you can think about them in that concept. Or, so again, another more concise alternative, contemplate the arising, vanishing, and both of the body. So this would be a more simple way to do that. You think of your body being born, existing, dying, and eventually going away. Or contemplate that there is a body, like we did before, with bare attention. So just without thinking about it, but just contemplating about there is a body. And continued mindfulness. So we stay mindful of that. And then, again, dwell independently, not clinging to anything in the world. Then there's a refrain. And the refrain is on page 9, right at the very top. So we'll go ahead and go through that now so you can see how this fits. And so in each of the main topics above, there's followed by this refrain of 4 subdivisions. So you can see this is getting just more and more complex as we go through this process. So the first one is internally contemplate the object within your personal experience. So here we're talking about the body. So in this case, contemplate the body within your experience of the body. Then externally, reflect on the object in the experience of others. Now, we've only been talking about it in terms of our own experience, so this adds another dimension. Now, somebody else's body. Imagine their body and what it would be like in each of these things. And then both. Develop a comprehensive and balanced view of the object, your body and their body, all of our bodies. They're similar in many ways. And then the second part of this is gaining insight into impermanence, suffering, and non-self. So the origination of the object. Where did the object come from? Well, here we're talking about the body, so we could go to that, and we could look at the birth process of the body, then the vanishing of the body in terms of impermanence, suffering, and non-self, and both of those, a more holistic view of all bodies in terms of those aspects of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Then the third one, bear constant attention on the object. And you'll notice there's a footnote on this one. The third and fourth are very similar to shamatha, single-pointed, calm, abiding. And so here, bear in constant attention. That's basically what we do with shamatha. We have an object that we're focused on. So you're basically doing this at the third part of this refrain. You're doing that, but focused on whatever the object is. Here the object is the body in this first of the 4. So that becomes it. And then the second part is knowledge of that attention. This is the awareness thing that we talked about before. There's the first part is the mindfulness, the second part is the awareness. And then the fourth one is dwelling in complete detachment. Okay? You just let go. It's like the emptiness aspect after the mantra. And then not clinging to anything. We come back in doing Tantra practice, we come back from that emptiness aspect of meditation, we come back, we re-arise as the deity, but we have no attachment. Okay? We're detached in that sense. So that gets inserted over and over and over again with each of these major parts. Now we go a little bit quicker. The body one is the one that takes the most time and has the most categories, subcategories there. So the second one is contemplation of feelings. As I mentioned before, the feelings that we're talking about here aren't so much emotional kinds of feelings, but rather touch-related things. Again, internally, externally, and both. These are arranged in pairs. So the first one, when feeling carnal, that is physical, especially sexual, and a pleasant feeling. So a pleasant sexual feeling. Okay? So when you're feeling that, what does that feel like? Internally, externally, both together, united. Okay? When feeling a spiritual pleasant feeling, okay, a little different than a carnal kind of a feeling, but physical, spiritual in this case, and something that is pleasant. Then the next pair, when feeling a carnal, painful feeling. Okay? So something about the body, perhaps a sexual feeling, but that it's something that is painful. And then D, when feeling a spiritual, painful feeling. Okay? A little bit different, so you want to get in touch with what that feeling is. Then when feeling a carnal, neither painful nor pleasant feeling, kind of a neutral feeling. And then when feeling a spiritual, neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Okay, so again, we're trying to get in touch with those. Or, so we have some alternatives again. Dwell contemplating the nature of arising, vanishing, and both of feelings in general. Okay, how those come, they abide, and they go. Okay, and they can be good feelings, and they can be bad feelings. Or dwell contemplating there is a feeling. Just, oh yeah, I noticed there is a feeling, with bare attention and continued mindfulness. So you're being aware, you're paying attention to what's going on, but you're not really digging into it and analyzing it. Then, again, we dwell independently, not clinging to anything in the world. And then we insert the refrain. So each of these four things, we put that other thing. So it's a second aspect of coming back and kind of redoing that from a slightly different way of looking. The third one is mind, contemplation of mind. So we did body, we did feelings, and now we look at mind. And here we have 8 pairs, so again, quite a few things. We look internally, externally, and both. So we understand the mind with and without each of these things. So the first of the 3 poisons, lust, okay, desire, grasping, can be sexual, but it doesn't have to be. Just some kind of craving for something. And so understand here the mind, not the feeling of lust, but the mind. What's going on in the mind when we do this? And then hatred, again, focused on the mind. What is going on? Not the feeling, not the emotion, but the nature of what's going on in the mind. And then delusion. Okay? So delusion, one of the comparisons that's often made in our tradition when we talk about ignorance in the 6 realms would be the animal realm, and we talk about ignorance as the afflictive emotion. But it's not our fundamental ignorance of not understanding the true nature of things. It's related to that, but it's not understanding the suffering we cause to others. Okay, so I'm a lion and I go after a gazelle, and I catch it, and I put my claws into it, and I bite its neck to kill it, and so forth. You know, it's just lunch. But not understanding that that's painful to the gazelle. Okay? So that's the ignorance of the animal realm that we're talking about there. And then focus versus distraction. Okay? What is it like in the mind to really focus on something as opposed to just kind of be distracted by other things going on? And then exalted versus unsurpassable. So meditative attainments like jhanas and formless absorptions. So unsurpassable means absolutely magnificent, absolutely perfect, if you will. So things that are like that. And how is it when that's not happening? How is it if it is happening? course, maybe you never experienced that or don't feel like you've experienced that. Or maybe it was just a tiny moment or something like that. And that's certainly possible as well. And then unexalted and surpassable, the lack thereof. Okay? So if you haven't ever experienced it, then pay attention to what it's like to not have experienced that. The next one is concentration, focusing our concentration, our mind on something. And then liberation, actual enlightenment. If you've had that. If you haven't had that, that's okay. What might it feel like? What do you think that it would be like in the mind? Okay? I guess that's your point here. Tibetan's point of the heart, the head, when we talk about mind. Or, okay, so here's the short forms. First one, dwell contemplating the nature of arising, vanishing, both of the mind. Okay? We become aware of the mind, or something happens in the mind that we become aware of, and it abides and it disappears. We become distracted, or whatever it is. But pay attention to what's going on with the mind. Or dwell contemplating there is a mind with bare attention and continued mindfulness. And then again, dwelling independently as a part of that. And then once again, we insert that refrain of the 4 parts, additional work to do. Then part 4, contemplation of phenomena, the 4th of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Moving toward insight. So now we're moving from shamatha kinds of activities more into the vipassana kinds of activities, of gaining some understanding of the implications of these things. So we understand when there is any of the 5 hindrances. 5 hindrances, according to the Buddhists, are sensual lust. So that could be lust in any kind of senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Ill will, intentionally wanting to do something, to harm something, somebody else or something else. Dullness and drowsiness, a little tired, sleepy during your meditation. Restlessness or remorse. And the 5th one is doubt. We've probably all experienced some doubt in doing our meditation practice, or because meditation isn't going well generally, or something else in your life isn't going well, having doubt about that. So any of those, and then it goes on, or not. So having any of those experiences, or not having any of those experiences. And as a part of that, we look at how each arises, it abides, it is abandoned, and does not rise again in the future. Okay, so that's an interesting idea. It comes, that seems to happen fairly naturally. It goes, that seems to happen fairly naturally. But how do we keep it from happening again? There is the trick. And then increasing our concentration. So increasing our concentration helps us to keep it from happening again. Okay? Or, so we're already into the alternatives here, dwell contemplating the nature of arising, vanishing, both of phenomena. Or establish mindfulness that there are phenomena with bare attention and continued mindfulness. And then dwell independently, so just relaxing and to not clinging to anything. Then there's a second part. For each of the 5 aggregates, so the first were the 5 hindrances, for the 5 negative kinds of experiences that we may have. The 5 aggregates: form, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. And so we do it with those. Understand internally, externally, and both the aggregate itself. Say we pick perceptions. So understanding perceptions, what is that, what does it mean, and then its origin and its passing away. Then dwell independently, not clinging in the world. Then see for each of the 6 internal and external sense bases. So these are our senses and what that does. So the eye and seeing, the ear and hearing, and so forth. Nose and smelling, tongue tasting, the body, or in this case skin, touching, and mind and thinking. So those are the things we look at. Understand each of these internally, externally, and both. So it's going to take some time to go through each of those. Then understand the fetter The problem. Wait, what's the problem here? Well, the desire and lust that binds us in the sense faculty to its object. So whatever it is, we see something and then we want that something. This wonderful chocolate cake with raspberries on top. So we have this desire. So, how does that happen? What is it that attracts us to that? Why is that happening? And then then how does that arise dependent upon the desire and the lust and so forth? And then how the fetter arises, how it is abandoned, and how it does not arise again in the future. So that last part is the part that we're really doing in terms of the Vipassana aspect, the insight. So we're looking at these happening, but we've already actually looked at that as it comes and goes a little bit. But now we're looking at it as coming and going, and how do we keep that from happening again in terms of it being a fetter? That doesn't mean all chocolate cake is going to be a fetter, but when things, when we have this really strong desire, I can't sit here anymore, I got to go over there and eat the chocolate cake, then that's a problem. So we need to look at that and try to keep that from happening. And then again, dwell independently without clinging. And then we have the fourth one, the 7 factors of enlightenment become manifest. What are the 7 factors, you ask? Well, the first one is mindfulness, the one we've been looking at primarily. Discrimination of phenomena. We divide things up into different categories, give them labels. The energy factor present, and the rapture, the feeling that comes from that. The discrimination of phenomena, good, bad. The energy, I already went that. Tranquility, the peace, the relaxation aspect. The concentration, really staying focused. And equanimity, being able to stay in that more peaceful state without any attachment or aversion to that. Internally, externally, and both. So understand whether the factor is present or not. Okay, so you don't have to have every one of them, but is it there or not? How it arises, how it comes to fulfillment by development, how it arises and how that happens. What are the things that happen that make it happen? Then dwelling independently without clinging. And then the last one we mentioned before, the difference between the middle length of this sutra and the longer one was the Four Noble Truths. So here we finally get to the Four Noble Truths. And this is actually fairly simple in the way it's described. So in the other version, it's much more complicated than this, but this is sufficient for our purposes. So the first truth is dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction, discontent. So what we're trying to do is understand what that is. What is suffering? What causes suffering? How do we keep it from happening again? Kinds of things. And then the cause of suffering is the second one, the ignorance of the true nature of self and phenomena, emptiness, shunyata, a lack of any inherent self-existence, lack of being independently existent on our own without any causes or conditions. Because self and all phenomena are interdependent or dependent upon other causes and conditions and impermanent. So the Buddha talked about all of those, but here we spend some time really looking at that. Then the cessation. So he said it doesn't have to be this way. We can overcome that in nirvana or peace or liberation from dukkha. And so look at that and say, okay, what does that mean to us? And how do we understand that? And so forth. And then the path. How do we do that? And so the Noble Eightfold Path is the standard way of describing this, but it gets described other ways as well. And so one of those ways is looking at it in terms of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Okay? The 3 trainings. It's kind of a short version of the Noble Path, Eightfold Path, which includes right view, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. And so looking at each one of those, it might be helpful to do a little reading if you're not familiar with some of the details about what's intended to be included in each of those, to help give you a little bit more clear idea of what it's being addressed as a part of this and how that may help you as a part of overcoming dukkha, overcoming that suffering, which is what the Buddha wanted us to do. So we can all be happy. Okay, so that concludes for today, and we will move on. You've got your reading list of the things, the parts that we'll look at next week as a part of that, and we'll see you back then.